The celebration hall of the Veyari fortress shone with silver lights, casting long shadows across the walls carved from black stone. The banners of victory hung proudly, each one marking a campaign won, a battle survived, a memory sealed into history. For the Veyari, this night was unlike any other. Their greatest commander, Thalrek, had returned home after many cycles of war. He was the hero who had stood on the edge of destruction and turned it into triumph. The crowd roared his name as he entered. His scales glimmered under the torchlight, and his tall frame carried both strength and fatigue. He had seen things no other Veyari had seen. His eyes, once bright with youthful pride, now carried the weight of countless battles. He walked slowly, his every step greeted by cheers, though his expression was not one of joy. He was tired, not in body but in spirit. Behind him followed a group of soldiers, veterans who had fought under his command. They too carried scars, but unlike Thalrek, they laughed freely, happy to be home at last. The war was over. The Veyari people believed that now they would rest, rebuild, and sing the songs of glory. Yet deep in Thalrek's heart, he knew that not all truths of the war could be sung. Some truths had teeth. The great hall soon filled with music. Crystal instruments rang with high tones, and food was set on long tables. The smell of roasted meats and spiced roots floated through the air. Warriors drank, laughed, and told stories of battles fought against the Zorath Empire, their sworn enemy. But as the night deepened, their voices turned to whispers, and their eyes turned to Thalrek. He sat at the center of the hall, his massive arms resting on the stone table. His comrades gathered close, curiosity burning in their eyes. "Commander," one young soldier asked, "you fought beside humans. Tell us about them. Are the tales true? Are they really so strange?" Thalrek's gaze rose slowly. For a moment he said nothing, only stared into the fire that crackled at the heart of the hall. The flames reflected in his eyes, and the room fell silent. The younger soldiers leaned forward eagerly, while the older ones waited with quiet patience. "Humans," Thalrek finally said, his voice low but steady, "are not what you think. They are not what anyone in this galaxy thinks." The silence grew heavier. Another soldier, a veteran scarred from battle, tilted his head. "But Commander, they are fragile, are they not? I saw one once, years ago. Thin skin, small bones, short lives. How can such beings fight in war?" Thalrek nodded slowly. "Yes, they are fragile. That is the first thing everyone sees. That is the first mistake everyone makes." The young ones chuckled softly, thinking their commander was about to tell a humorous story. But Thalrek did not smile. His tone grew sharper, his eyes darker. "When the High Council asked me to take human soldiers into our ranks, I too believed it was folly. I thought they would break in the first battle. I thought they would run from fear. But I was wrong." He leaned forward, his claws tapping lightly on the stone table. "Humans do not break the way you think. Their bodies may fall, but their will rises again and again. I saw them walk through storms of poison gas. I saw them fight with broken limbs. I saw them laugh when death was certain." His comrades exchanged uneasy glances. The idea of a soldier laughing at death was strange to them. To the Veyari, battle was serious, grim, and sacred. They laughed. One soldier whispered, disbelief heavy in his voice. "Yes," Thalrek said. "Not because they did not fear. They fear as much as we do. But fear does not rule them. Fear feeds them. It makes them sharper, faster, more dangerous. Where we see the end, they see another chance." The room grew colder. The fire popped and hissed, but no one moved. One of Thalrek's closest companions, a captain named Veylan, finally spoke. "Commander, if they are so fierce, why do they not rule the stars already?" Thalrek's gaze shifted to him. "Because they are young. They have only just begun to reach into space. They do not yet understand the power they hold. But make no mistake, when they do, no empire will stop them." The younger soldiers whispered nervously. To them, humans had been little more than strange allies from a distant world. Now, hearing their commander speak with such weight, they felt a chill run down their spines. "Tell us more," one urged, though his voice trembled. Thalrek leaned back, folding his arms. His expression was grim. "If you wish to know about humans, you must be prepared. What I tell you may change the way you see this galaxy forever. They are not just allies. They are not just another species. They are something else entirely." He looked at the fire again, remembering the faces of the human soldiers he had fought beside. He remembered their shouts in the heat of battle, their jokes in the darkest hours, their determination when all seemed lost. I will tell you the truth, Thalrek said finally, his voice carrying across the hall. But do not think it will bring you comfort. Humans are many things. Fragile, brilliant, fearless, dangerous. To fight beside them is to witness something you cannot forget. To fight against them, he paused, his eyes narrowing. To fight against them is to stand before the storm itself. The soldiers shifted uneasily. Some glanced at the doors as if expecting a human to walk in at that very moment. The music had long faded. The food sat untouched. Every eye in the hall was fixed on Thalrek. He had not yet told them the whole story, but the way he spoke was enough to stir both awe and fear. Tomorrow, Thalrek said, standing slowly, his tall frame casting a long shadow over the fire, I will tell you more. Tonight, remember this. Humans are not weak. They are not to be mocked or underestimated. They are the most dangerous allies we have ever known. He turned and walked out of the hall, leaving his comrades in silence. The crackling fire was the only sound that remained. The young soldiers looked at each other nervously. The older ones stared into the flames, troubled. The legend of Commander Thalrek had already been great, but now a new legend had begun to form. The legend of humans, fragile in body yet unbreakable in spirit. The night carried on, but sleep did not come easily for those who had heard his words. The next evening, the great hall filled again. Word had spread quickly about Commander Thalrek's strange words. Soldiers, veterans, and even scholars came, eager to hear the truths that only he could tell. The fire burned brighter, and the long tables were crowded with listeners. The sound of chatter filled the room, but when Thalrek entered, silence spread like a wave. He moved with heavy steps, his eyes sharp but distant, as though still lost in the battles of the past. When he reached the fire, he stood tall and looked around at the waiting faces. He could see the hunger in their eyes. The hunger for knowledge, for stories, for the mystery of the humans who had fought beside him. Last night, Thalrek began, his voice low and steady. I told you that humans are not weak. Tonight I will tell you why we all believed they were weak in the first place. The crowd leaned forward. Even the veterans who had heard the first part of his tale were eager for more. At first sight, Thalrek continued, humans are fragile. You will laugh when you see them for the first time. Their skin is soft without scales or armor. Their bones are thin. A single strike that would barely wound one of us can shatter them. Their hearts beat faster. Their lungs tire more quickly, and their lives are short compared to ours. They are, in every way, weaker than most species we know. A ripple of laughter ran through the younger soldiers. One leaned toward another and whispered, how can such beings survive at all? Thalrek's sharp gaze silenced them. That is what we all thought. That is why the galaxy underestimated them. But we were wrong. Their fragility hides something greater. He paused, letting the fire crackle in the silence. Then he spoke again, more firmly. I watched them march into storms of poison gas. The air tore at their lungs, yet they wrapped their faces in cloth, coughing and choking, and they kept moving forward. I saw one soldier take a blast to the chest that should have ended his life. He fell, yes, but he rose again, covered in blood, still fighting until the enemy fell before him. And when he could not fight anymore, he still crawled, still shouted, still urged his comrades to victory. The hall was silent now. Not even the sound of eating or drinking disturbed the air. They do not stop, Thalrek said, his voice dark with memory. Even when their bodies are broken, their spirit drives them. It is a strange thing to see. You expect them to fall, to cry out for help, but instead they rise again. It is as though pain is not their enemy, but their companion. One of the scholars, a gray-skinned elder, raised his voice. Commander, are you saying that weakness is their strength? Thalrek nodded slowly. Yes, because they are weak, they have learned to endure more than the strong. Where we might retreat to preserve our lives, they move forward, even if it costs them everything. Their fragility has forced them to find courage where none should exist. The younger soldiers shifted uncomfortably. It was difficult to imagine such determination in creatures so soft and short-lived. Thalrek turned his gaze to them. I will tell you of one battle, he said. We were trapped in the mountains of Rithar. The Zorath had us surrounded. Our food was gone, our weapons nearly broken. We had no hope. Then the humans did something we could not understand. They sang. A murmur of disbelief filled the hall. Yes, Thalrek said firmly. They sang. In the night, while the enemy watched us from the cliffs, they sang songs of their home, of their families, of the stars they longed to see again. Their voices rose into the cold air. The enemy heard it too. And do you know what happened? Their courage grew. They fought the next day as though nothing could stop them. And we, the Veyari, felt their spirit spread into us. We fought beside them and we won. His voice grew heavy, almost reverent. Their weakness should have destroyed them. But it gave birth to something else. Something stronger than armor, stronger than fear. Captain Valen, sitting near the fire, spoke quietly. Commander, I do not understand. You say they are fragile, yet you call them stronger than us. Thalrek turned to him. Strength is not always in the body. Sometimes it is in the heart. Humans are fragile beasts, yes, but within them burns a fire that even the strongest body cannot match. The hall trembled with whispers. Some soldiers nodded slowly, beginning to understand. Others shook their heads, unable to accept such an idea. Thalrek raised his clawed hand for silence. You ask why I call them dangerous. I will tell you this, when a human falls, another rises to take their place. When one is lost, 10 more come forward. They are not endless, yet they fight as if they are. They do not surrender, they do not forget, and they do not forgive easily. He let those words hang in the air, watching as unease spread across the room. One human soldier told me once, Thalrek said, his voice softer now, that their bodies may be weak, but their stories are eternal. They fight so that their names will live on, so that their children will remember them. To them, death is not the end, but a step into memory. That is why they do not fear it as much as we do. A young warrior stood, trembling. Commander, are you saying they welcome death? No, Thalrek answered firmly. They value life deeply. But if death comes, they will face it with open eyes. They will fight until their last breath, because to them, every breath is worth giving if it saves another. That is why they are both fragile and unbreakable. The hall fell silent again. The fire's glow flickered across the faces of the listeners. Some looked inspired, others troubled. The idea of fragile creatures who refused to yield was not something they could easily understand. Thalrek looked into the fire, his voice lowering. Do not mistake them. Do not mock them. Their fragility makes them seem harmless, but that same fragility hides their greatest strength. They are the fragile beasts who refuse to fall. He stepped back, his shadow stretching across the hall. Tomorrow I will tell you more. I will tell you about the fire inside them that no world can extinguish. Then you will truly understand why humans are both our allies and our greatest mystery. With that, he left the hall, his heavy steps echoing against the stone floor. The soldiers sat in silence long after he was gone. They thought of the humans, soft-skinned, fragile, and yet unyielding. Some felt admiration. Others felt fear. But one thing was certain. No one in that hall would ever think of humans the same way again. The third night came quickly. The great hall of the Veyari fortress once again filled with soldiers, veterans, and scholars. By now the air itself seemed charged with expectation. Each word spoken by Commander Thalrek had spread through the fortress like wildfire. The young and the old, the curious and the doubtful, all came to hear what more could be said about the strange allies called humans. The fire in the center burned brighter than ever, its orange flames casting tall shadows on the stone walls. When Thalrek entered, silence immediately fell. He walked slowly, his heavy footsteps echoing. His presence carried weight, not just because of his rank, but because of the truths he had spoken on the nights before. He took his seat at the center of the hall, close to the fire. His eyes scanned the room. He could see both eagerness and fear in the faces staring back at him. Then in a deep voice he began. You have heard me speak of their fragility, Thalrek said. You have heard me tell of their unyielding will. But there is more. There is something far greater within humans, something that makes them unlike any other species in this galaxy. The room leaned forward as one. They burn with a fire, Thalrek said firmly, an endless fire that no storm, no war, and no despair can extinguish. He paused, letting the words settle. The fire behind him popped and hissed as though agreeing. They are creators, Thalrek continued, makers, builders. Where most beings see broken metal and shattered stone, humans see a tool, a weapon, a chance to rise again. I saw them build weapons from scrap, from rusted parts, from pieces of machines that even we would have thrown away. In the middle of a battle, when defeat was certain, they turned scraps into victory. The younger soldiers frowned in confusion. Scraps? One asked. You mean they fight with broken tools? Thalrek nodded. Yes, I will tell you a story. On the desert world of Koresh, the Zorath forces outnumbered us 10 to 1. They struck our weapons storage, leaving us with almost nothing. Many of us thought the end had come. But the humans, they did not despair. Within hours, they broke apart broken ships, melted metal in crude fires, and shaped weapons with their own hands. They built shields from doors, blades from steel beams, and explosives from fuel canisters. They turned ruins into an arsenal. The listeners stared in disbelief. Thalrek's voice grew heavier with memory. And they did not just build tools, they built hope. They gave those weapons to us too. They shared everything they had, even when it left them with less. That night, with weapons made from scrap, we held the line. We survived. And when the dawn rose, the enemy believed reinforcements had arrived, for our spirit had returned stronger than before. But it was not reinforcements. It was the fire of humans. The hall erupted in murmurs. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others looked amazed. The thought of soldiers making weapons from wreckage during a battle seemed almost impossible. Yet Thalrek's voice carried the weight of truth. He raised his claw to quiet them. You must understand, it is not just their hands that build. It is their minds. Humans imagine things others cannot. They see paths where there are none, doors where there are walls. Even in the darkest hour, they find a way forward. Their fire is their imagination. Captain Valen spoke, his voice thoughtful. Perhaps this is why they expand so quickly among the stars. Their minds do not stop searching. Thalrek nodded. Yes. To humans, the impossible is only a challenge not yet solved. They refuse to accept limits. Even when their bodies fall, their ideas remain. Their fire is endless because it is carried not by one, but by all of them. The elder scholar leaned forward. But Commander, what drives them? What makes them keep going when all reason says they should stop? Thalrek's gaze turned dark. He looked into the fire, the flames reflected in his eyes. What drives them is survival. But not survival alone. It is something deeper. They fight for each other. They fight for their families, for their children, for their stories. A human does not think only of himself. He thinks of those who will come after him. His fire burns for others. The hall grew still. The words carried weight far greater than any victory song. I saw them, Thalrek continued softly, stand side by side in the ruins of cities. I saw them pass water to one another when none was left for themselves. I saw them carry the wounded on their backs while running through fire. I saw them refuse to leave anyone behind, even when it meant their own end. That is the fire of humans. They live not only for themselves, but for those around them. The younger soldiers lowered their eyes, humbled. Even among the Veyari, such selflessness was rare. Thalrek's voice grew sharper again. And this is why they are dangerous. You must understand. If they fight for themselves alone, they are fierce. But when they fight for each other, when they fight for their children or their homeworld, they become unstoppable. They will endure any suffering, face any danger, and burn everything in their path if it means protecting those they love. He let the silence hang, the fire crackling. The listeners shifted uneasily. One human captain told me once, Thalrek said, lowering his voice, we do not fight because we are strong. We fight because we must. That is the truth of humans. They burn with endless fire not because they choose to, but because life demands it. And once that fire begins, nothing in this galaxy can put it out. The hall was silent. No one laughed now, no one whispered. Even the younger ones who had once mocked the idea of fragile humans now sat still, their eyes wide, their thoughts heavy. Thalrek rose slowly to his full height. The flames painted his scales in gold and red. Remember what I tell you. Humans may look fragile, but they are not. They are fire wrapped in flesh. They burn brighter than any star, and if you fight beside them, you will feel their fire too. But if you stand against them, his voice dropped low, almost a growl, then you will know what it means to face a fire that does not die. He turned, his long shadow stretching across the hall as he left. The soldiers did not move. They sat in silence, each one lost in thought. The image of burning humans etched into their minds. The fire in the center of the hall crackled on, but now it seemed smaller, weaker compared to the endless fire Thalrek had spoken of. The fourth night arrived, and the great hall of the Veyari fortress was quieter than ever. The fires burned low, casting long, trembling shadows across the stone walls. Commander Thalrek entered, his presence filling the room with an almost tangible weight. Soldiers, veterans, and scholars had gathered again, their faces a mixture of awe and curiosity. Unlike the previous nights, this time a tension lingered in the air. The audience had begun to realize that humans were not just extraordinary, they were unpredictable. The Legends Commander Thalric spoke of stirred admiration, yes, but also fear. He took his seat, his eyes scanning the crowd. "You have heard about their fragility," he began, his voice calm yet firm. "You have heard about their endless fire, their courage, and their strength of mind. But humans are not only light. They have shadows. Shadows that make them even more remarkable and more dangerous." The hall grew silent. A few younger soldiers shifted uneasily, unsure of what Thalric meant. "They are brave," he continued, "and they are selfless, but they are also unpredictable. They question authority. They argue, debate, and challenge even their own leaders if they believe it is right. In the middle of battle, a human soldier might refuse an order, not out of fear or disobedience, but because he has thought of a better way. And if he is right, his way can save lives or win a war." Captain Valan's sharp eyes narrowed. "Commander, are you saying they cannot be controlled?" Thalric nodded slowly. "That is exactly what I am saying. You may lead humans, but they do not follow blindly. You may fight beside them, but they will think for themselves. And you must respect that, or disaster will follow." He leaned forward, his claws resting lightly on the table. "I have seen humans destroy entire machines of war, not to show power, but to prevent them from falling into enemy hands. I have seen them make impossible sacrifices, giving everything they have to protect those they care about. And sometimes, they do not stop, even when it costs them everything." The hall shifted in unease. To the Vayari, such behavior was both admirable and terrifying. Their culture valued obedience and honor above all else. Humans, with their freedom and relentless spirit, were something different entirely. "Let me tell you of a valley on the planet Zalora," Thalric continued, his voice low and even. "We had positioned our forces to hold the pass, but the Zorath forces were advancing with overwhelming numbers. Humans were among our ranks. When the moment came, they made a choice no other species would have made. They destroyed the valley itself, killing both enemy and friend alike to prevent the enemy from advancing. They acted without hesitation, without complaint. It was not cruelty, they called it necessity. And in the end it worked. We survived. But at what cost?" A murmur spread across the hall. Soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. "You see," Thalric said, his voice firm, "humans are not simple. They are guided by something larger than themselves: loyalty, duty, imagination, and survival. But their choices can be unpredictable. They can be gentle and kind in one moment and unyielding and ruthless in the next. They live in contradictions that we cannot always understand. That is the shadow of humanity." An elder scholar leaned forward. "Commander, you speak of great courage, but also of dangerous unpredictability. Is that not a weakness?" Thalric shook his head. "No, it is a strength. Their unpredictability makes them impossible to defeat easily. When you face a human, you cannot assume their next move. They think, they adapt, they fight differently than any species we have known, and that is why, even when they are outnumbered or outmatched, they survive. They endure. They rise." He paused, looking at the fire. "But do not mistake this as perfection. Humans are not flawless. They make mistakes, sometimes grave mistakes. They argue, they fail, and they hurt one another. But even in failure, they learn. They remember. And they do not repeat the same mistake twice if it can be avoided. That is their true power, their ability to adapt, to grow, and to endure." The soldiers remained silent, listening with rapt attention. Even the veterans, seasoned and unshakable, found themselves unsettled. Humans, so small and fragile, had left such a profound impression on Thalric that his words carried the weight of experience. Thalric's voice grew quieter, almost reflective. "I remember a mission on the world of Yutaris. Our forces were ambushed in the canyons. Many of our soldiers fell. Humans fought beside us, carrying the wounded, shielding the weak. But one human, a young soldier no older than your sons, climbed the cliff alone to redirect the enemy. I begged him to stop. I told him it was suicide. He looked at me with eyes full of fire and said, 'I cannot stop. Others are counting on me.' He vanished into the shadows, and we thought him lost. Hours later he returned. Alone he had saved countless lives. He carried himself not for glory, but because he believed it was the right thing to do." The hall was silent. The fire crackled as if even it paused to hear the story. "Humans," Thalric said, standing now, his tall frame looming over the listeners, "do not fight for themselves alone. They fight for others, for the world, for the stars. They have shadows that make them unpredictable. They have fire that makes them unstoppable. They have courage that defies reason. And this combination, this strange mixture of light and shadow, fragility and strength, makes them both remarkable and dangerous. He let his words sink in, then lowered his voice. If you ever face humans in battle, do not underestimate them. Do not assume you know their limits. You may see a weak body, but you cannot measure the fire within, and if you fight beside them, respect their choices. Trust their instincts, because they will carry you forward when all seems lost. The soldiers sat in silence, absorbing the weight of Thalrek's words. They had come seeking stories of courage and strength, and they had found them, but also lessons in caution. Humans were not simply allies or soldiers. They were a force of nature, unpredictable and unstoppable. Thalrek's eyes swept across the hall, meeting each listener in turn. Remember this, he said, his voice low and steady. Humans have shadows. They are capable of incredible light, but also of acts that challenge our understanding of morality and strategy. Do not fear them, but do not ignore the lessons they teach. Watch them closely, learn from them, and above all, respect them. He turned and walked toward the exit, his heavy steps echoing through the hall. The soldiers remained seated, their minds racing. They thought of the humans Thalrek had described, small, fragile, yet fierce, unpredictable, yet loyal. They realized that the humans were more than just soldiers. They were legends in motion, shadows and fire combined. The fire in the center of the hall burned low, but in the hearts of the listeners, a new fire had begun to glow. A fire of curiosity, respect, and cautious admiration. As Thalrek disappeared into the night, his words lingered in the minds of the Veyari. The shadows of humanity were not just stories. They were warnings, lessons, and glimpses of a power that could shape the galaxy itself. The fifth night arrived with a calm unlike the previous gatherings. The fortress had grown quiet, and even the wind seemed to pause as if listening. Commander Thalrek's presence in the hall was enough to draw every eye toward him. Soldiers, scholars, and veterans, all who had listened to his tales over the last 4 nights, now awaited the final revelation. They had heard of human fragility, their unyielding will, their endless fire, and their dangerous shadows. But tonight, Thalrek promised the ultimate truth. He entered slowly, his tall frame moving with a weight that only experience could grant. His claws tapped lightly on the stone floor, each step echoing through the hall. The fire in the center flickered, casting long, restless shadows. Soldiers had grown accustomed to hearing his voice, yet tonight, a tension gripped the room that no one could shake. Thalrek sat, folded his arms, and looked at the crowd. You have learned about humans, he began, their strength, their fire, their shadows. But there is one truth that you must understand above all else. One truth that will change the way you see not only humans, but every creature in this galaxy. The audience leaned forward, holding their breath. Even the veterans who had fought wars and seen death countless times felt a weight settle upon them. Humans do not fear the end, Thalrek said, his voice low and steady. To them, death is not the enemy. It is simply a step in a journey that continues beyond what we see. This is what makes them unstoppable. The words hung in the air. The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. Some shifted in their seats. They had heard tales of courage before, but nothing like this. He continued. I have seen them fight in hopeless battles, surrounded by enemies on all sides with no chance of survival. I have seen them bleed, fall, and yet rise again. And when their comrades fall, they carry on. Not just for themselves, but for those who remain. They do not falter, they do not surrender, and they do not quit. That is the truth of humans. They endure when others would give up. A young soldier whispered, Commander. How can they do that? Thalrek's eyes met the young ones. Because humans are not ruled by fear alone. They are guided by something deeper, hope, loyalty, imagination, and love. These things give them strength far beyond what any weapon or armor could provide. They fight because they believe in a tomorrow worth living for, even if they may not see it themselves. The room fell silent. The weight of his words settled in every heart. Humans, small and fragile, yet capable of unimaginable courage, had become legends in Thalrek's eyes. But there is more, Thalrek said, leaning forward. They do not follow the rules that bind other species. They think, they question, they challenge, and they act when others hesitate. I have seen them turn the tide of battles not with strength alone, but with ideas, strategies, and actions that no one could predict. Their minds are as dangerous as their courage, and this combination is what makes them feared even by those who fight alongside them. The elder scholar nodded slowly. Commander, you are saying their fire cannot be measured. It cannot be contained. Even death does not stop them. Thalrek's gaze hardened. Exactly. Humans carry a fire that no galaxy can extinguish. They are fragile yet unbreakable. Small yet vast. Predictable in loyalty, yet unpredictable in action. Their strength is not in one thing alone. It is in everything they are and in everything they fight for. That is why every empire that underestimates them will fall. A captain spoke cautiously. Commander, are you warning us? Or praising them? Thalrek's voice grew firm, almost like a command. Both. Praise, yes, for they are the most extraordinary allies you could ever have. Warning also, for they cannot be controlled or tamed. You may fight beside them, and you may even trust them, but do not think you can command their hearts or thoughts. They follow their own path, and that path is guided by something no other species truly understands. The endless fire of humanity. He leaned back, letting the silence linger. Soldiers and scholars alike were struck by the enormity of his words. They could see it now. Humans were not just allies. They were forces of nature, unpredictable, unstoppable, and awe-inspiring. Thalrek stood and raised his voice. Remember this, all of you. If you ever face humans in battle, respect them. Observe them. Learn from them. Because they are not just warriors, they are legends made flesh. They are fire and shadow, courage and cunning, hope and endurance. To fight alongside them is to witness something extraordinary. To fight against them is to challenge a force that no weapon can defeat easily. The hall was silent. Even the young soldiers who had come seeking tales of bravery now sat stunned by the truth. The image of humans, fragile yet unbreakable, burned into their minds. Thalrek's gaze swept across the room once more. Do not forget this. The galaxy has seen many civilizations rise and fall, but humans are different. They are unpredictable, resourceful, and relentless. They are fragile, yes, but their fire cannot be quenched. And that, my friends, is why we will always need them. Respect them and fear them. If we fight against them... He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Then he lowered his voice, almost whispering, and when you see them rise again after every loss, after every defeat, remember that what you witness is not merely survival. It is the power of a species that refuses to be broken. A species that will shape the galaxy not with might alone, but with courage, creativity, and the endless fire in their hearts. The fire in the hall flickered, casting shifting shadows across Thalrek's face. The soldiers felt a chill that was not of cold, but of awe. For nights they had listened to tales of human courage and strength. And now the ultimate truth had been revealed. Humans were not just strong, they were eternal in spirit. Thalrek turned and walked to the doors, his steps echoing across the hall. The soldiers remained seated, minds racing, hearts pounding with the realization that the galaxy had underestimated humans for far too long. The legends they had laughed at or dismissed were real, and their fire would not die. Outside, the night sky stretched endlessly, stars glimmering like scattered jewels. Somewhere out there, humans were alive, fighting, creating, enduring. Their fire continued to burn, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the quiet of the hall, a young soldier finally whispered, Commander, we were wrong. We thought they were fragile. We thought we could predict them. But now, I see. They are unstoppable. Thalrek's voice came from the shadows. Yes, unstoppable, relentless, and eternal. Respect them, learn from them, and never forget. The galaxy's greatest force is not in weapons or armies. It is in the heart of humanity. The fires burned low and the soldiers sat in awe, their minds forever changed. The legend of humans, fragile yet unbreakable, unpredictable yet loyal, had reached its peak. And from that night onward, every Veyari who would fight alongside or against humans would remember Commander Thalrek's words, the brutal truths about the species that would shape the future of the galaxy. The night carried on, and even as the fortress slept, the memory of humanity's fire burned in every heart. They were no longer just creatures of flesh. They were living legends, and the galaxy would never underestimate them again.